Okay, here we go.
Is this really off of online?
Actually, I felt embarrassed reading some of these.
I'm curious what tips men are finding when they look for job interview tips, because I was not happy with a lot of these.
The Me Too movement against sexual harassment.
Is this the best a man can get? Instead of excuses,
Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys. Boys will be boys.
we need to make change.
Come on.
Men need to hold other men accountable.
It's not how we treat each other, okay?
Because the action we take today will be seen by the men of tomorrow.
Good afternoon, and welcome to this session this afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. You're actually facing in the wrong direction. The view's on the other side. So thank you very much for being here with us and spending your time with us for this session on how advertisers and advocates are dismantling gender stereotypes in media. Before we start, I would like to acknowledge and recognize that we are on the territories of the Coast Salish peoples. We would like to acknowledge and recognize that we are in the shared unceded territories of the Coast Salish peoples, Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh nations. We are thankful for permission to conduct our business on their lands. This panel is going to be talking about power and how we create and perpetuate different notions and stereotypes and cultures of power. Because we are talking about advertising, media, and entertainment, among the most powerful social concepts and social ideas that we have in our midst. To have this discussion, I have a fantastic line of panelists. I have Vitika Yadav, who is the head of Love Matters India from RNW Media Network. We have Leah Claremont-Dion, who is a Canadian filmmaker and author from Production de la Rue. We have Leslie Slayton-Brown, who is the Chief Diversity Officer, HB Incorporated. And we have Alison Tuman-Camphouse, who's the Global Program Leader, Gender Equality and Children's Safe Drinking Water for Procter & Gamble. My name is Lopa Banerjee, and I'm the Director of the Civil Society Division at UN Women. And it is my great privilege to be your moderator for this session. I'm going to start by just referring to a report that was released just yesterday. This is the 2019 Sustainable Development Goals Gender Index that was published just yesterday. What does it say? The 2019 Sdg Gender Index finds that with just 11 years to go until 2030, nearly 40% of the world's girls and women, 1.4 billion, live in countries failing on gender equality, failing in 2019. In addition to that, a total of 2.8 billion women and girls currently live in countries that are not doing enough to improve women's lives. So we either are in a set of countries that are failing on gender equality, or we are in a set of countries that are not doing enough to improve the lives of women and girls and indeed improve the lives of their societies. And what are they failing on? What does this failure look like? We're not talking about deep, complex issues. So there's failure on equal representation in leadership positions. The failure is on pay gaps, pay inequality, and the failure is on gender-based violence. So this is the cold face. I mean, we're not talking rocket science. This is the fundamentals. This is our bodies, our work and value, and what we are remunerated for, and how we are considered valuable in society. And it is about how we occupy space and how we use influence. And on all of these fundamental counts, we are failing. And this is not something that is hard to change. This can be done if there is political will, if there is will across the sectors within positions of power who can make things happen. But fundamentally, this is about, when we talk in terms of women's representation in leadership, when we talk in terms of gender-based violence, when we talk in terms of unequal pay, we are talking about stereotypes. We are talking about norms. We are talking about culture. We are talking about the ways in which women and girls are viewed in society. And that is what this panel is here to discuss. Because media, entertainment, advertising is what promotes, and either promotes or reflects the societies that we live in. And the power that media, entertainment, and advertising have to create culture change, to create norm change, to reflect the world that we live in. Prime Minister Trudeau said yesterday that diversity is a fact, but inclusion is a choice. I want to actually go beyond that to say that exclusion is also a choice. Exclusion is also a political decision. And therefore, it would be very interesting to hear from this panel before us in terms of what it is that media, entertainment, and advertising can do in terms of creating the norms and cultures that are at this point in time leading to this state of affairs, where we are 11 years away from 2030 and we are failing.
We're not going to have a light conversation today, are we? Way to get us started.
So why don't you start, Leslie, and with telling us about what is the cost of not responding to diversity.
Wow. So first of all, the first video that played is an example of what we've done at HP in being able to look at the biases, the stereotypes, as you mentioned, Lupa, that exist in particularly the technology industry. I think HP is one of the only tech companies at this conference, which is interesting. And I think the cost is huge, because for us, it's a matter of the loss of opportunity for customer, but more importantly for our workforce. And so the video that we played was really a look at pulling insights, gleaning insights from customers, from our audience of daughters, in this case, dads and with their daughters, of the different myths, the different stereotypes that play. And so we wanted to make a concerted effort to say, and to amplify, and to be really bold with the wonderful opening that you had for us, is to disrupt the industry in a meaningful, creative, and innovative way. And so the cost for us is a lack of innovation, a lack of belonging and inclusion, a lack of equitable pay, equitable opportunity for not only women, for women of color, for LGBT community, for people with disabilities, so on and so forth.
Thank you so much. Let me ask that question to everybody actually on the panel. Let me ask you, Viveka. You are an activist, and of course you're looking, for this norm change. What is it that you need to be doing to really disrupt this moment, to really make your activism revolutionary in terms of, because that's what's needed if at this point in time we really need to be doing things differently?
Thank you so much, Rupa. It's wonderful to be here. And before I respond to your question, I would just also add profit. Because I think the cost of exclusion is also reflected in profits. And there is research, not a lot of research out there, but there is a clear reason why most corporates are wanting to ride the wave of what we are calling femvertising, and how it is reflected in profits and the margins that companies can make and possibly make. And I think we just need to be much more bold and authentic about also sharing why is it important, you know. So there is this goodwill factor, but then there is also how it is reflected on the sales that a company or a product is making. Just going back to what is happening, I mean, I think one thing that we know is that cognitive frameworks around sex and gender, they're formed at an early age, and they are established and reinforced by what popular culture and advertisements feed young people with. And I personally believe that popular culture and advertisement has much more power than scholarly articles on feminism and gender equality in actually shaping gender images. And these lines have to be blurred. In our work, what we are doing is trying to really see how traditional, image of non-profit work and communication can actually incorporate what popular culture is doing. So we use Bollywood really creatively in our work to really communicate about gender, about sexuality. But at the same time, we also look at collaborations with corporates and with advertising agencies, because I think we have to start working, we have to start to look at cross-sector collaboration in terms of what we want to achieve. And again, being authentic. Like, it's not only about corporates, I think it's also about non-profits to start being more authentic about sharing stories of their work. Like, what is it that we have been doing well, and where are these gaps and challenges, and what have we failed at? And how do we become more honest about it, and how do we address stereotyping in our work as well, not just corporates, but I think also with non-profits.
Thank you. Alison, the Gillette commercial responded to the zeitgeist, to Me Too. Yes. And of course, it created a lot of conversation and controversy. And it would be really good to talk about how both the conversation and the controversy changes discourse.
Well, thank you, Lopa. It's a pleasure to be here with my fellow panelists, and to those who are joining here in the room, a beautiful day in Vancouver, and those wherever you are around the world as well. We're delighted to have you on WD 2019 live as well. This is a really interesting dialogue, and what we've been doing at P&G for some time. We are a house of many brands who you probably know around the world. You mentioned Gillette, others like Always has been engaged, Ariel, Share the Load, and a number of other campaigns around the world. Really, because we do have a responsibility, and it is both a business opportunity and it's an opportunity to be a force for good. And so you mentioned Gillette, which was very recent. We just had a discussion earlier today here about that campaign. A number of people who were involved were here speaking about it, and it really did. It sparked a dialogue. We talk about doing that, and it certainly did. We see our opportunity to reveal insights. We have a lot of understanding of people. We call them consumers sometimes, but people around the world, and how they live their lives. And today, advertising and media just does not reflect the majority of our world. We're part of the ANA in the US, the Association of National Advertisers, but they've done global research and looked at ads all around the world, and we see that more than 40% of people just don't see themselves reflected in advertising today. And we also find that, in looking at 60,000 ads, that women especially see themselves objectified, diminished, stereotyped, just tremendous room for improvement. And so Gillette, actually, we'll talk about their case. Gillette has been for 30 years. It was the 30-year anniversary of The Best a Man Can Get, that campaign that started in the late 80s. And they were really looking for quite some time in talking to both men and women about, what does that mean today? What is a man getting, and why is that kind of where they are? And they came to the realization that it's not just about not being the bad guy, and that's sort of in somewhat response to the women's voices being louder than ever, and many movements around the world. Just not being the egregious bad guy does not make you a good guy. And so it's actually their message in that ad, which when you see, and this was a short version, you can actually see the full version will be part of the film festival here at Women Deliver tomorrow morning at 10:30 in the fueling station. We believe is about, us all being better, particularly men being better. And what was ironic was, or, somewhat puzzling, scratch your head, is why people, had such a reaction to it. And it certainly did spark a conversation. Within 2 hours of the ad being up, 1 million people had viewed it. It was the most disliked ad on YouTube within days. Simultaneously, it was also the most liked ad on YouTube in that same time frame, which is a very interesting thing to see, is just how much dialogue, discourse, polarization, I guess you could say, is there in that case. And what was really interesting is when we showed it to thousands of men and women and did some research along the way, it was actually independent research that was done and brought to us, more than 2/3 of people said the best thing about that ad was the message. And that was for men and women. And so the controversy that you mentioned, we tried to stay very true to what was the real reaction and not the overheated social media rhetoric, because a very small group of people who may have very valid concerns and want to be shared can often amplify something that looks much larger than it was. And so that's why today we continue to see that ad sparking dialogue in schools and community groups, which is very encouraging, because that's what we need to have that dialogue, in some cases meet people where they are and move things forward and change some mindsets.
I actually have a follow-up question, Alison, before I come to you, Leah. I have a follow-up question. So, so this was your public-facing, communication. What did it do internally? The discourse as well, and yes, it was a small group of social media, but this is the reality, right? It's the small group of social media that in a sense, changes so much else of the, of the pH level in the way discussion continues. So what did it do about internal discussions?
So there were definite discussions. There was, within our company, with employees, with the men and women of our grooming business who were part of this, there was dialogue. There were some internally and externally who said, why don't we just stick to selling soap, or in this case, razors? And what's interesting about that ad is there's no mention of the product actually in it. And we've done this before. We've had a number of campaigns. The Talk was a campaign we ran last year as part of our My Black is Beautiful platform here in the U.S. that's about the conversation that African American Black families have with their children. And it's a very different talk than other families might have. And that provoked a lot of conversation and controversy as well. But we, the heat comes, the conversation comes at you, but we never wavered. And I'm very proud of the Gillette team and others who were part of that to say, this is what we believe. This is who we are. And people, I keep calling, not consumers, but people around the world want to know, what is your brand? What is your company? What is your organization? And what do you stand for? This is, this is the future of you need to take a stand, and you need to let people know what are the values and what do you stand behind. And I was very proud of Gillette when that came. They actually were some very vocal, violent threats against people who were identified in the media as part of our company and part of that effort. Despite personal risks to themselves, they stood by it, and it continues today, and they've done more. Just last week, we launched a new ad in Canada here. It's called First Shave, and it's about an individual who was born a woman and has transitioned and asked his father to teach him how to shave, his first shave. And that's another one that, just one after the other, we're trying to reflect more of the world today in what people see in our advertising. So
picking up from that, Leah, in terms of, in some ways, Alison, you're talking about, shareholder value, consumer value in your brand, in your organization, in the shares and the profit. So Leah, responding to that, as an activist who is in the business of actually moving that shareholder value, if you will, from the other side, both as an activist and as a consumer. What do you have to say
I just want to ensure to you, because it's actually my subject of thesis, the hate against feminist and feminist question. And what I see with the Gillette campaign is what Susan Faludi called the backlash. And the backlash is this violence we have against those who want to change the world and who want to keep the dominant speeches. And it's really interesting because it's one of my mission to offer counter stories, other stories, alternative narrative that we have and that exist. And I'm taking my hat of a TV host in Quebec. I fought to make a TV show happen, and this TV show was a documentary series where 60 women were heard, and we gave the voice to those women who are actually invisible in our society. And it was really important for us and for me to give this voice, because if we don't represent them, they don't exist in the public sphere and space. And like you said, Lupa, I think that occupy the space and the public sphere is a political act, but we need to fight to make those voices heard in our society. So with this TV show, we actually present badass women that are in some vulnerable situation, women that are that live in other situation. And you know what? It was a success. It was the biggest success of our channel, that is actually a really popular channel in Quebec. And we thought we changed mentalities, and honestly, we succeed to make people open to other stories. And if we want to change mentalities and call out inequalities, we need to share those stories, because if not, we're gonna stay in statu quo, and conservative voices and people will be really happy for that statu quo. But it's really difficult to do so. We need to fight. And I can tell you, as a TV host, as a producer in Quebec, it's hard to make things change, because mediatic system is a conservative one, I think, and we want to sell always the same stories. So it's not easy to do so. We need to have allies, people that trust us, that help us, like Gillette or other I think companies. But it's important to understand that these voices, if we don't hear them, they don't exist. And they exist. So it's a political choice to do so.
Thanks.
Yeah, that's it.
Thank
Sorry.
you. I actually want to get back to that point that you raised about not being easy. And I'm starting with you, Leslie, but actually any of you can jump in. And I want to talk about what is hard. Because the point over here is we can either take baby steps, right? You know, things need to be changed, and you take baby steps for change, or you make dramatic change. This moment calls for dramatic transformation, right? So what's hard about that?
Well, I think the interesting thing is in the approach that we've taken at HP is to be intentional. And so I don't know about hard really being the answer, as it is about being intentional about what you want to do and the change that you want to see. And I think that, and we heard this yesterday in our kind of pre-conference for private sector, was the research that McKinsey unveiled around 2030 and women potentially even being left behind in the workforce if we don't reskill and re-educate. The intentional thing that HP and the approach that we've taken is first and foremost starting with our board of directors, making sure that we have equality at that board level. And so we are, and very intentionally put women on our board, and not just any woman, but qualified women at different levels and different colors. small business, entrepreneur, large business. And so we did this cross-section of making sure that we're now at 45% representation of women and 35% representation of people of color.
And how is that changing the culture and business policy?
So to the point of revenue and shareholder value, first of all, our customers demand that. And so, so what we see is the influence. So first intentionality, second influence, and third boldness. It's disruptive change that has to happen. It's a cry of, we're a rallying cry. There's a sense of urgency for 2030. And if we don't all step into this and own it, we'll never get there. And we'll be having these conversations in 2030, 2040, and and so on and so forth. And so, intentionality, making sure that everybody is in, and really focused on being a part of the solution that we're trying to drive for.
And do you think that intentionality actually really addresses, for example, the different ways in which bias plays out, consciously, unconsciously, and sometimes, I mean, not just consciously and unconsciously, but also sometimes very deliberately?
Well, when you get diversity at the highest levels of the company, and you also have this groundswell building from the bottom, you have the opportunity to really kind of, I say, flex out a little bit, in that when we look at the efforts that we're making, we see success, we see creativity, we see innovation, and we see an approach that's happening that is, I think, very much, I'm losing my train of thought because of this beauty, by the way, like behind me, but very much ensuring that we're meeting the needs of our customers, the demands of our customers, so we have to be reflective of that. So what we did was, we started with our leadership, and then our senior most leadership pushed out to influence within the industry. Our marketing and comms person signed on with Free to Bid to say that we want to see creatives, we want to see directors at the highest levels of the agencies that we work with be reflective of the diversity that we're being held accountable for. And so from a private sector standpoint, we're saying, hey, we're in this, and we're going to influence from a governance standpoint, build an infrastructure that helps push this, and at the same time, the ecosystem that helps support it and make it happen.
Right, so let me ask the two activists actually on this panel, and I mean, everybody is an activist since you're here, but I want to actually talk to the two of you who are actually working around specifically advocacy. Do you think this is enough? Because I mean, if we are talking in terms of game changing, what would you say to the two, representatives of industry over here who are in a position to look at this transformative agenda? What would you say?
I would say good work, but still a long way to go. And I would say that is because, again, just thinking about the narrative that is being sold and being a little critical about it. When we are talking about a lot of imagery sort of changing in terms of having working women out there and a 21st century women out there and sexually active and independent, one would also see that they're still conforming to what is a gender image of being thin and beautiful and wearing lovely clothes. There is intersectionality, and diversity is still missing in many ways.
I appreciate that, but here's the thing. In less than 1 year, we had 400% change in the industry, 73% with HP alone. And so this
when you say change, what
change
is the change?
Meaning women in the highest levels making the decisions and viewing the ads that they're putting out there in order to say, no, that's not appropriate, or no, we won't do that. And so I appreciate that, because I think that not only a single person or a single company can do that, it has to be a collective impact that makes that happen. And so if everybody flexes out to that level, then we'll start seeing the change occur.
And that's going to be my question next, but Vitika, if you wanted to finish what you were saying.
I'm excited, I'm sorry.
And that's a responsibility at our end as well. So when I'm saying this, it is not just reflective of what corporates should be doing, but I think we need to call this out in all kinds of sectors, in all kinds of companies and organizations, including non-profits. How do you look at intersectionality? How does it reflect in the company culture? How does it reflect in the kind of work that we do? Are we being critical about the work that we are putting out ourselves? And what are the challenges? I mean, one of the things you asked this question, what is hard? I remember, starting years of Love Matters, I mean, we always deal with censorship with Facebook and Google all the time, but it was so hard to actually have much more diverse images on the website and social media, because we get banned like every week for something or the other. But that was hard, and just to get that out was a challenge. But to be at it and to be in different forums such as this one and talk about it, and also hold these other companies accountable who are censoring the content that is for public, I think we really need to get that narrative out as well.
It's interesting because I was censored on Instagram this week because I was breastfeeding, actually. But anyway, there are two answers to this question. First of all, I think that the change has to come from citizens. And Mark Zuckerberg wants to do profit, and companies want to do profit. So we have to protest together. I know that the together is not really in trending these days, but we need to fight, and we need to make hear our voices to make change, because they won't change if we don't call out the situation. First answer. Second answer, I think that you as individuals, through the companies, in the companies, you can make history. You can change things. There's somebody in Gillette that who was really sensitive about this issue and decided to lead the project. I think that you can be leaders of opinion. You can change things, but you have to take the leadership of things. But it has to come from us, from citizens, to push you and to make you change things.
So Alison, your response?
I would. So I have some thoughts about this. So Procter & Gamble is the world's largest advertiser, and we have been on this journey for quite some time. And I would argue that our company is made up of citizens, activists, and people who feel the same way. We have a very strong set of principles, and it is changing culture. So I'll give a couple examples. The Like a Girl campaign 4 years ago, only 19% of people thought the phrase like a girl or to do something like a girl was a positive thing. After that campaign, which was made by a female director, as was the Gillette campaign, as was several others that have been widely awarded in the industry, from the female behind the lens, behind the camera, and in many other roles of the creative process, which is why we jumped on and followed your lead at HP and joined Free the Bid last year, and are looking to make it as international as possible to fight the myths that there are not enough creative women like you in the work that you do in the advertising industry to tell those other stories that are not being told. And so with our platform and with our convening power, we are all about bringing many more companies on board to join this with us, because until we collectively do it as an industry, we will not see as much change, and it certainly won't be as fast as all of us up here and all of you in the room want to see it go. So I take that challenge. We have been standing up, calling on our peers, and this is something that we should not be competitive about. We need to collaborate, and we need to take it, because the higher order goal of gender equality, and certainly in all of its intersectionality, women of color, women of however sexual orientation people define themselves, class, education, all of these elements need to come to light. People with disabilities, don't let me forget, different abilities, all of these things need to be reflected in the images of culture, whether it's advertising, media, film, all these different areas, because that's the world we live in, and it makes it all seem much more, I don't use normal, it's not the right word, but it makes it seem and reflect the world that we all live in. And those who have been creating these images for a long time are sensitive to the demands for change that are coming from all of you, from all of us within our industry who are so constructively impatient. And we are looking for ways to join together across not just the private sector and the creative community, but the NGO community, civil society, because collectively we can actually make this go much faster. And so I would suggest that when you look at that if you're in business, if you're in an organization, look within your organization to find that diversity, that thought, because we know when we tell stories, and the power of stories are so significant. You see it here all this week. When you tell stories that haven't been told, it unites people. It takes us further, in humanity. So,
thank you. On that note, I want to actually be able to turn this over to the audience, and because you are participating in this conversation. On this point of telling stories, what are the stories that are either not being told or that need to be told more of, more loudly, given the power and the resources that reside in industry and in this sector? So questions, comments to specific panelists or to the panelists in general. Anyone from the audience? Yes, do we have mics? Yeah. If you can introduce yourself and then speak, and keep your interventions short.
Hi, my name is Amrita. I'm from India, from an organization called Swayam, working on violence against women. So the positive thing is the advertisements from PNG, we use a lot of it. Procter & Gamble, the Share the Load one, we use it in our training and capacity building. So those are very, very positive things. But these are a drop in the ocean. So how do you influence other organizations and corporates? And what Vatika said, that they influence our lives a lot more than the textbook knowledge. So how do we then kind of bring about change and hold each other accountable, where gender disparity and gender inequality starts from the time you're born, with the whole pink, blue, and then gone on to the objectification of women? How do we move forward in a gender equal world where each of us are responsible for creating that world?
So
let's take a few questions. Yes. Yeah, can we do it? Let's take a few more questions. Okay, right here.
I don't. Oh.
Right here.
Go ahead. She's saying.
Sorry.
You. Go ahead. She's saying you. Go ahead.
The lady here. Yeah.
I don't need a mic.
I think it's being recorded, so you do need a mic.
Hi, my name is Simone, aka DJ Sakir, and I also work at Estrella Foundation, but I'm not here in that capacity. But one thing that I do think is missing from advertising is that I know that there is a push for diversity and showing mixed race families, but what I think is missing are traditional black families, especially within the United States, because that isn't pushed enough, and maintaining a black family is a very difficult task in this day and age. And I think that a lot of times in advertisement we're showing mixed race children, but not necessarily families that have a mother and a father present in the home. And I think that's one thing that's missing.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions? I need to see if you can raise your hands high because I can't see very well. Okay, the lady there. Any other questions? And then there's one at the back, right at the back, and then we'll come back to the panel. So this question here, and then the one right at the back, and okay, one more there, and that's it. Okay.
It's more of a comment. My name's Bonnie Hay, and I'm an actress with UBCP ACTRA. And we're here because we also are working from the ground up. Whereas, as you mentioned, let's get people in the higher up work. We're doing it from the bottom up. We're not just taking the jobs and going, well, okay, I need money. Sometimes we have to do that. But we are really, really working hard by saying we don't want to see this. We want to be part of the gender equality. There's only still 30% of us females are getting work in media, in film and TV, and that is horrible. And so we're trying in ways of telling the casting directors, when you're reading a script, can you please look at a character? That character does not need to be male. They can be the owner of the shop, the owner of the deli, et cetera, et cetera. I just went for an audition yesterday. They changed it to a female. It's a diner owner. That's so rare for them to do, but this casting director decided to fight and talk to the producers, who then talked to the writer, who then, so what I'm just saying is that we're gonna meet you in the middle and we're gonna do this. So we're also working really hard. Thanks.
There was one on the right towards the back, and then the one that was the last in this middle row. And then we'll come back to the panel.
Hi, sorry, my voice is horrible, but I'll try to be as clear as possible. I work for the Thomson Reuters Foundation, and we promote human rights globally. One side of what we do is we provide legal pro bono for NGOs, and we're working with a couple of French NGOs looking at sexism advertisement in France and how to change the law in France. So in the UK from June, in order before sending out an advertisement, the regulator will have to see it and check if it's sexist or not. So we're trying to see if we can do the same in France. We'll be willing to do similar things globally if people are interested in looking at how we can change the law to really make it very difficult to have sexist advertisement out there. So, and if anyone is interested over there, I'll be happy to talk.
Okay, thank you. And then the last question right in the middle over here at the back.
Thank you very much. Sarah Lafam from Rutgers in the Netherlands. We work on the topic of abortion, among other issues, right across the world, and we see that this is one of the biggest threats to women's rights from the United States to Africa to Asia. I just wonder if you had any comments on terms of how media agencies and advertisers could be addressing such a highly sensitive and polarizing issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we have a set of questions, and in no particular order, whoever wants to go respond to it. We have a question, actually, a really important question that on the first question, which was around from Swayam, which was on for media and industry, and in this particular case, I think the two speakers representing industry here, on how your influence. How can you be bigger in what you are doing? That was the point. So how can you be bigger? How can you play bigger? That was one question. The other question on what is missing from what you're showing. You referred specifically to traditional black families, African American families, but it actually responds to what is missing overall in different ways. And then there was this very interesting question on, who is behind the camera often determines what gets shown in front of the camera. So that question, which would be a very interesting question to respond to as well. And then fundamentally, this issue on sexual and reproductive health and rights, which actually goes back to the issue of bodily autonomy and the whole question, and this goes back to what I started with, which is that we are debating, we are currently failing on the fundamentals. So bigger, more, and what's missing. So anybody who wants to go first.
Well, I will take a crack because I think I can answer two questions in one, which I know time is important because we have a lot of great sessions still to come this afternoon. So to the question about India and the question about who's in the scripts and what we see in media, there's some really great partnerships. That would be my answer. Partnerships is how we can go faster together to broaden what we're doing. So one example in India is we work with Sesame Workshop, and Gali Gali Sim Sim is what Sesame Street is called in India. And we created a series of short vignettes that are part of the show where Chamki, who is a young schoolgirl in India who goes to school in her uniform, and she has younger brothers, and she demonstrates at a very young age to girls and their brothers and mothers and fathers and their environment around them what girls can do and when they go to school. And it's very complementary to P&G's work with Shiksha, which is a long-term program around marginalized children who are not able to be in school. And so they reach millions. I think early childhood education and those who see children can really help. And the script piece that also translates to early childhood and what's in media is the Geena Davis Institute for Film and Media is here this week. Madeline Denono is speaking, I don't know exactly when, but you can find it in the app. And she's also going to be at our P&G salon for a conversation on Thursday morning, talking about exactly how they and others in the industry are supporting, working with writers in the rooms. See her is also doing this to really look at what is in the process that we can make changes so that you trigger these questions about free the bid. We didn't explain what that was, but free the bid is actually when you bid a piece of work by the creative agency, you need to have one female. And it's actually, as you said, tremendously successful in increasing representation, not just of women, but people of color. So I would strongly encourage you to find out what some of us are doing, and we can connect you with those folks so that we can go faster, because we really do need to make a bigger impact. Thank you.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just quickly want to add one. I think it is these examples that that others can learn from, and second, I think it is again important to understand when we're looking at more body of work. Most often, what we see is, and this is not about P&G, but most of the corporates would come out with one ad at a time, and it's with the intention of selling a product, and that does not really reflect in the brand identity and strategy otherwise. I think corporate social responsibility is largely pushing corporates as well to really align a particular product or an ad to their sort of social responsibility, and in a good way, but how far have they gone with it? I mean, I always see it as a struggle in India that when you talk about education programs, and especially for young children, extremely important, one has to look at the kind of budget that the corporates are spending. But when you look at higher education and university education of girls, none of the corporates are investing in it. And the fact is, you're out of high school, you won't land up a job.
Okay, Leslie and then Leah.
So I think a couple of things. And we're talking, I feel like, some kind of different things in different buckets. And the reality is accountability. I think it's about accountability. As individuals, we have the ability to speak up, to use our voice, to let it be heard through social media now more than ever. So there's no reason we have to sit back and point fingers at whether nonprofit versus corporate, any of that, or as a consumer to allow the things that are going on to continue to go on. Quite simply, accountability. So speak up, use your voice. When you see ads that are not appropriate, that do not reflect, and I have a little connection here, in that it's like, hey, I came from a traditional family and I don't see my family represented anymore. So what's with that? And so I respond to that, and that's what I think all of us can do. And so let's stop sitting back and let's stop waiting for somebody else to take the lead and do it ourselves.
Leah?
I think that there's a good tool to speak out, like you say, it's social media. If we want to respond and answer to those ads, those sexist ads, social media is a wonderful tool. It can be also sometimes violent, but it can be also a form of empowerment for women. But sometimes it's a bit complicated to be heard. So there's also an organization that's called Women in Media that help women, director, creative, to make their voice amplified in the cinematographic industry. So I invite you to get informed about this organization. And another one that I want to mention is Inform Opinion, which it's actually a Canadian organization that is a base of contact of women expert, because we talked a lot about the directors, creative, but we need to also understand that diversity in the medias are spread like with experts. So Inform Opinion is also a great resource.
So we are coming to the end of it, so we're very quickly, 30 seconds each, your closing comments, but on what, so going back to the point that you said, own your power, own your agency, take responsibility. So what did you want to say coming in on the panel? What are you going to say going out? And what are you going to do going out of here using your voice and power? So starting with you, Leah, very quickly, 30 seconds.
To share alternative stories, we need to keep strong, and for that we need to have a safe space and a safe public space. So we need to fight online misogyny, and this is my cause, so I'm gonna say stop online misogyny, and I'm doing a movie about that, so I'm gonna invite you to watch it next year on Netflix and other channels. That's it.
So I want to just take a few of my seconds to thank Global Citizen for putting this together in partnership with RNW Media. When we were talking about using your voice in social media and activism, Global Citizen has an entire platform around this world that's really about using your voice, your social currency, to drive accountability and to really advance our progress towards the SDGs in 2030, which we're all here and very focused on 5 and those other SDGs around it. And we will continue to leverage the power of partnerships to be a force for good. Myself individually, I lead a lot of our partnerships, and at Procter & Gamble, we know we can go farther, faster together, and so we will continue to look for those who share our views and do as much as we can to advance all around the world the cause, including yours. Thank you.
I think I would like to say that it is the image and narrative that is being thrown at you that is imperfect, not you, not your body. So change the narrative. We have the power to change it. Unstereotype for diversity of people and perspectives in what we see and what we consume.
Be intentional, be influential, and be bold. Call out the companies that you see doing it wrong, and call out the companies and purchase from the companies that are doing it right.
And from my side, before I close, and I thank the panel, and I will also invite Global Citizen on to talk about the She is Equal campaign. From our side, next year, 2020, will mark the 25th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, which remains till today the sort of a blueprint to achieve gender equality that stakeholders and governments committed to doing. Next year will be 25 years after that, and certainly those who were there in 1995 when that was drawn up did not believe they would be sitting here today, 25 years later, saying that change is actually regressing. So next year, what UN Women will be doing is convening a conversation together, co-hosted by France and Mexico, but actually everybody in Paris in the summer of 2020 to talk about the kind of coalitions and solidarity and conversations and actions that need to happen to ensure that we do not get to 2030 with still the same levels and this egregious inequality crippling our planet. And with that, thank you very, very much to this wonderful panel. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Global Citizen. And I'm going to ask Leticia to come up and talk about the She's Equal campaign.
Thank you so much. Hi, everyone. I'm Leticia Pfeffer, Senior Manager of Global Policy and Government Affairs at Global Citizen. And I want to give a big thank you again to our partners at RNW Media for making this session a possibility, to our wonderful moderator Lopa and our amazing panelists, important partners. So today I really want to encourage you all to be champions of change, to stand up, speak out, and take bold action so that we can indeed achieve a world where she is equal. Last year, Global Citizen launched the She is Equal campaign to really make our most substantive and impactful bid to tackle gender inequality, to raise the voices of unsung women around the world, and to generate very substantive and impactful policy and financial commitments in support of women and girls. We partnered with Procter & Gamble, with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with the governments of Belgium and Luxembourg, and we saw over 1.8 million actions taken by citizens around the world, and this helped generate over $1 billion in financial commitments, which are set to affect the lives of 65 million women and girls around the world on issues ranging from girls' education, to access to family planning, to investments in menstrual hygiene management, leveling the law. The list goes on and on and on. And so this year we've set a very measurable KPI at Global Citizen to ensure that of all of the commitments, both policy and financial, that we're able to mobilize, that at least half go to ensure that she is equal. And so we want to mobilize another $1 billion, and we can't do this alone. We really need your support. So today I want to encourage you all to sign on to Global Citizen, download the app, go to globalcitizen.org, and sign the She is Equal pledge. We want to get at least 1 million signatures by citizens around the world to really hold leaders and businesses to account so that we can actually dismantle gender stereotypes and achieve a world where she is equal and deliver on the SDGs. So join us, take action, and help us achieve a world where she is equal.
Thank you.